The second I stepped into my in-laws' house and felt the unsettling quiet, I knew something was off. But when I found my mother-in-law locked in the attic, I realized this was no ordinary family visit. This was the beginning of something far darker. I went to visit my in-laws alone last weekend, and I seriously wish I hadn't. What I found when I got there, well, it was like something straight out of a horror story. It all started when Bryce, my husband, got stuck at work. We were supposed to visit his parents together, but at the last minute he called me and said he wouldn't make it. Now, I've always had a good relationship with his mom, Sharon. She's the kind of woman who sends handwritten cards for no reason and insists on giving you the last slice of pie, even if she made it for herself. So I figured I'd go ahead and drop by anyway to surprise her with some cookies I baked the night before. I thought it'd be a nice gesture, just pop in, chat for a bit, and leave. But when I pulled up to their house, something felt off. There were no lights on, and the front door, which Sharon usually swings open with a wide smile, remained closed. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe Frank, my father-in-law, had taken her out for a late lunch. I knocked and waited. No answer. After a minute, I let myself in, balancing the plate of cookies in one hand while calling out, "Sharon? It's me, Ruth. I brought something for you." Nothing. No reply. I looked around. The house was eerily quiet. It wasn't the cozy place I was used to, filled with the smell of fresh coffee or Sharon's humming in the kitchen. I pulled out my phone and texted Frank just to check. "Hey, I'm here at the house. Where are you guys?" But today the key was in the lock. His response came back almost immediately. "Out with the guys. Sharon's resting. You can head home if you want." Resting? That didn't sit right with me. Sharon was always the one who jumped up to greet us, even if we'd been there the day before. And resting in the middle of the day? It wasn't like her at all. A weird feeling crept into my stomach. I slowly made my way through the house, my voice echoing as I called her name. "Sharon? Are you okay?" Still nothing. That's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound. I froze. It was coming from upstairs, somewhere near the attic. My heart started to race as I climbed the stairs. The tapping continued, steady and strange. When I reached the attic door, I stopped cold. It was always locked. Frank had made it clear nobody went into the attic. Not even Sharon. It was his space, some kind of personal workshop or storage room, I guessed. But today the key was in the lock. I swallowed hard, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Something about this felt wrong. "Sharon," I called again, this time my voice barely above a whisper. No answer, but the tapping stopped. I hesitated for a moment before turning the key and pushing the door open. And there she was, Sharon, sitting in an old wooden chair in the dim light, looking as though she hadn't moved in hours. Her usually bright face seemed worn, her smile weak. "Ruth," she whispered, startled by my appearance, her voice trembling. "You're here." I rushed over, setting the cookies aside and helping her up. "Sharon, what's going on? Why are you up here?" My heart was pounding in my chest, every instinct telling me that something wasn't right. Her eyes darted toward the door, and she opened her mouth to speak, but the words that followed made my blood run cold. Frank locked me in here," she uttered, her voice barely above a whisper. I blinked, shaking my head. What I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why would he do that? She sighed, rubbing her forehead. I reorganized his man cave while he was out. It was getting messy, and I thought I'd surprise him. You know how he gets about his space, but I didn't think it would upset him this much. Sharon let out a weak, forced laugh, but there was no real humor behind it. When he came home, he lost it. He said if I loved messing with his stuff so much I could spend time up here too. Then he locked the door and told me to think about what I'd done. I was dumbfounded. This wasn't just Frank getting upset over a room. He locked her up like she was a child being punished. I couldn't wrap my head around it. "Sharon, that's insane," I finally said, my voice shaky from the anger building inside me. "You're his wife, not some kid who broke a rule. He can't just lock you up because you reorganized his stuff." Sharon looked away, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "He didn't mean it like that," she whispered. "He was just angry. You know how he gets." I was floored. She said it so calmly, with such resignation, as if this were completely normal. My throat tightened with frustration. I knew Frank could be controlling, but this was abuse. "We're leaving," I said, standing up, my voice firm. "You're not staying here, not with him acting like this." Sharon glanced toward the attic door, clearly nervous. "Ruth, maybe I should just go downstairs and apologize. It's my fault for touching his things." "Apologize?" I cut her off, shaking my head. "You did nothing wrong. You don't deserve to be locked up like this. You're coming with me, Sharon, and we'll figure out what to do from there." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "But what if he gets angrier? I don't want to make things worse." "He doesn't get to decide how you live your life, Sharon," I said, my voice softening. "This isn't about him anymore. It's about you. You don't have to keep tiptoeing around him like this." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. But then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go." We didn't waste any time. I helped Sharon pack a small bag with a few of her things. She was nervous the whole time, glancing at the door like Frank might burst in any second. But as soon as we stepped outside, I could see her shoulders relax a little, like she was finally starting to breathe again. As we drove back to my house, I kept glancing over at her. She looked exhausted, like she'd been carrying this emotional baggage for years, and was only just now setting it down. "Are you okay?" I asked, breaking the silence. She gave me a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think so. I don't really know what's next." "Whatever it is," I said, "you don't have to face it alone." Later that evening, after I helped Sharon settle into the guest room, my phone started buzzing on the table. Frank's name flashed on the screen. I nodded and ignored the call. A few minutes later, the messages started coming in. "Where's Sharon? Bring her back now. She's my wife, and she belongs here with me." I rolled my eyes and put the phone down, trying to keep my anger in check. But it was getting harder by the second. When Bryce came home from work, I pulled him aside, trying to explain everything as calmly as I could. "She was locked in the attic, Bryce," I said quietly, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay composed. "Frank, he just left her there." Bryce's face darkened. "What the hell?" he muttered, his fists clenching. "Are you serious?" I nodded, watching as his anger grew. "She's in the guest room now, but Frank keeps calling, demanding I send her back." Bryce didn't waste any time. He grabbed his phone and dialed his father's number, pacing back and forth in the living room as it rang. I could hear Frank's voice through the speaker as soon as he picked up. "Where's your mother? She needs to come back home." "I'm not done teaching her." "Teaching her what, Dad?" Bryce cut him off, his voice shaking with anger. "What lesson are you trying to teach by locking her in the attic like a prisoner? You're out of your mind." Frank's voice dropped, trying to explain, trying to justify. "It wasn't like that, son. She messed with my things. She needed to." "I don't care if she moved every single thing you own," Bryce shouted, his face red with fury. "You don't lock her up. That's not how you treat someone, especially your wife." Frank tried to talk over him, but Bryce wasn't having it. "You're lucky I'm not coming over there right now, because if I did, I don't think it'd end well for you." He hung up the phone and let out a frustrated sigh, running his hands through his hair. "I can't believe he did this," he muttered. "I never thought he'd go this far." I reached out and put my hand on his arm. "You did the right thing, standing up to him." Bryce shook his head. "It shouldn't have to be like this, Ruth. I shouldn't have to stand up to my own father." The next morning, while Bryce was at work, Frank showed up at our door. His face was red, and he was fuming. "Where is she?" he demanded. She needs to come back. She has responsibilities, and I'm not done teaching her a lesson. I crossed my arms, standing firm. She's not coming back, Frank. What you did was wrong, and you know it. You locked her in the attic like she was a child. That's not okay. Behind me, Sharon appeared in the hallway, her voice soft but steady. I'm not coming back, Frank. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean you're not coming back? You don't have a choice. I do have a choice, she said, stepping forward, her voice gaining strength. I'm done being treated like a child, Frank. If my punishment for trying to help is being locked away, then maybe it's time I make some changes. Frank tried to argue, but Sharon wasn't backing down. I'm not living like this anymore, Frank. I'm done. The look on Frank's face was a mixture of disbelief and anger, but he knew it was over. He stormed off without another word, slamming the door behind him. The relief I saw on Sharon's face was indescribable. It felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off her shoulders, like she could finally breathe a little easier. A few weeks later, Sharon decided to file for divorce. She moved into a small apartment near us and even started taking that painting class she'd always wanted to try. It was like she'd been given a second chance at life, and she wasn't going to waste it. Bryce stood by her every step of the way, offering support and encouragement. You deserve better, Mom, he told her. You should have never had to put up with that. In the end, Frank lost more than just Sharon. He lost his son, too. But it was his own doing. He pushed too hard, and Bryce wasn't willing to let it slide. Sharon, though, she was finally free. And that was worth everything.